Howdy and welcome, folks, to today's KKE. Part of our asset management theme week this week, types and subtypes. My name is Ron. I've got Andrew here with me as per usual.
Howdy, everybody.
And so, folks, let me go ahead and warn you right up front, I have a ton of content for you today. I've got a lot of slides to cover, a lot of information with you, and then I want to try to squeeze in a demo. And as always, we'd like to have at least some time for Q&A. So I'm going to go pretty fast today and try to squeeze it all in. But don't you worry. As always, we're going to record this, and we'll be posting the recording to our on-demand archive site where you can go watch it in case you didn't quite get everything today. So then, without further ado, let's jump right in. Our preliminaries, of course, Backyard Boot Camp. And folks, we've only got 2 more events left this year, and one of them is next week in Santa Clara, California. Andrew's going to be out there for that. I'll be down in the doing the Austin one the week after that.
Still seats available next week.
Yeah. It's not too late, folks. There's plenty of seats left in Santa Clara. Especially to go and be with Andrew and a few of your newest and bestest friends that you can make out there. BBK is awesome, small classroom size, and you get lots of one-on-one time with the trainer, lots of one-on-one time with your fellow attendees, fellow students, 1 day of K2 if you like, and 3 day of K1 if you want. You get hands-on. We bring our own labs. Everybody gets their own little lab with a K1 and a K2 and test machines and so forth, and you get to try everything out. Get your hands on the latest and greatest as well, right? So definitely want to check that out, folks. Lots and lots of upcoming KKEs. You will notice, however, a few more open forums than we typically do. 2 things going there, folks. Number one, Andrew and I are going to be out a bit with both the Backyard Boot Camps and then with our Dell World. We're both going to be at that event as well in October. And also because we've skipped several open forums with all these 6-4 sessions that we're doing. We've got several theme weeks going here. So we wanted to make up for that as well. And speaking of lots of 6-4 related KKEs, and Andrew, if you wouldn't mind grabbing the link at the bottom of that slide and throwing it into chat there, I'd appreciate it. We've already posted the What's New in K1 that goes over all the new features that Mr. John Roboski did for us a couple weeks ago. And there it is in chat for everyone. You can check that out later if you didn't get to attend it or you want to go back and watch it again. The user portal customization ideas we did last week. And so that one hasn't quite made the archive yet, should be posted sometime soon. And then, of course, this week is Asset Management Week. Next week, we got Managing Macs, and then after that, we've got Monitoring Servers because there's new features there, Software Compliance, new features there. So we've got lots of deep dives on 6.4 there for you. All the great resources that we have here, folks, the support.softwaretodell.com. Is where you can go to find all the latest versions, 6.4 and whatnot, download them, apply them to your case products. You can also get to all our KB articles, et cetera, and so forth. ITninja.com is where you can interact with all of your peers and anything IT related, discuss them, crowdsource solutions, and so forth. Notice I replaced the KKE link, folks, left-hand side in the middle. All right, got a really, really cool new website that I want to share with you. It's in the links that Andrew just dropped into chat. Software.dell.com is, of course, the home of case.com now. /case training, you'll find everything case there. Folks, you'll find Jumpstart, Backyard Boot Camp, KKE, InkPad, everything is there. Definitely want to check that out. Case.uservoice.com is the place to go and tell us what you want us to do with the future of the case appliances. You can tell us what features you'd like for us to have, features to improve, vote on those submitted by others, and so on. Case.com/newsletter, InkPad, that's the direct link for it. And then our Connect website, connect.case.com, special join invite for KKEers. Definitely want to check that out, folks. Not only can you sign up and win prizes and for answering questions and surveys and stuff like that, and trade those points for the prizes. But maybe more importantly, the folks that were members there for the last few months have seen 6.4 before anybody else in the world did. Okay, that's where we sneak preview things. You definitely want to go join up out there. Our agenda for today, as I said, I've got a ton of content. I really squeezed in a lot today, and we've got even more to come on Thursday. Okay, so we're going to start real quick with an asset management workflow. I'm going to show you this visually, kind of what we're thinking about here, right? When we talk about managing the life cycle of things, we got to know where to get started with that. Okay. Then the fact that things in inventory are linked to things in assets. And some of the things in assets are linked to things in inventory. We need to understand how that relationship works. And then we're going to delve into the actual construction of assets. And we start there with the asset types and a brand new feature called subtypes that we have in 6.4. We're going to briefly mention importing, since that is a major way to both get started with getting your assets into the K1000 and also to update them periodically through mass updates. And we'll cover that. I got a really cool demonstration of the new asset types feature lined out for you. And then, of course, Q&A. As I mentioned, folks, I've got a lot to get through today. I'm going to go pretty fast to try to squeeze it all in. Our current generally available version 6.4 came out last Monday. You can see the new version numbers there, the new version of the agent. Also timed to be released at the same day was the K1000 Go mobile app. Got a major new feature improvement there to coincide and work with the 6.4 version of the K1000. And Andrew has just dropped links to all of this stuff in the chat window, bottom right-hand corner. As we go through, folks, and we drop these new links, you definitely want to save those to go through after the session today. All of our 6.4 sessions, we're going to call this out just to remind you, in case we have any non-English as a first language folks on the call today, or maybe you're an international company and you might have your K1 in some other part of the world or something along those lines. 6.4 has not yet been localized to non-English locales and languages. Okay, it's very, very important. There's no, you'll notice the bottom bullet point in red, underlined, italicized text. There is currently no mechanism for rolling back if you upgrade and regret it. Right? If you've got a non-English language K1000 interface, you've changed the interface language to German or Czechoslovakian or Chinese or something like that, right? Then you probably don't want to upgrade to 6.4 yet. We will be releasing a service pack to support all the various languages. It's timed for sometime end of year. Okay? So if you have any questions about this, you can contact Case Support, you can contact Case Sales, right? And they can talk to you about the specifics of your environment and upgrading, not upgrading, and so forth. Okay, really important thing you want to watch out there for. Now, asset workflow, and this isn't the entire life cycle, right? The entire life cycle of owning, from cradle to grave. This is the beginning aspect of it. I'm going to acquire something. I've just acquired some new asset. I need to integrate it into my asset tracking, okay, which is what we're going to talk about today. So here it is, right? We're going to purchase some new thing. It doesn't really, at this point, matter what we're talking about. We're going to focus mostly on devices, right? Networky type, computery type things, whether it's a laptop, a desktop, a server, a router, switch, firewall, printer, something along those lines. But it can be those things as well, right? You can certainly track any kind of crazy thing you want in your K1000 asset module. You can track things that don't have network connections, things that aren't even electronic, right? You can track furniture. You can track chalkboards. You can track projectors and smart whiteboards and whatever kind of thing you need to keep track of, you can track in the asset module. We're going to be concentrating mostly on network-aware things, what might be called smart or intelligent type devices things that have a network connection and can communicate on a network, because the K1000 has some really cool functionality in it to be able to communicate directly with those things. Whether it's the kind of thing that we can install an agent on, right, a computer with an operating system, or if it's something that can't take an operating system, right, it can't take Windows or Linux or Mac. It's running its own native OS, like a Cisco switch is running iOS, Cisco's iOS, right? Or whether it's a printer that has some sort of firmware on it that, you know, has a web page you can log into, it supports SNMP or something along those lines. Whether it can take an agent or not, if it's a smart kind of thing that can communicate on a network, that's mostly what we're focused on because of the features we want to talk about, okay? So we buy the thing, and then we manually add it. We could wait. In the past, that's what a lot of our customers have done. They actually waited until it arrived, and then they added it to their asset tracking system. Because at that point, they have a serial number. They can assign it an asset tag, an internal number that they use for themselves, right? So, but a lot of our customers want to add it prior to that, right? They want to add it to their tracking so that they know if they get asked, hey, they get a second request that comes in for that kind of thing, right? So we just ordered 5 computers, right? Because we got a request for 4 computers or something. We went ahead and bought them in 5s or something, whatever. And then, you know, a week later, before those actually arrive, we get another request for, you know, 1 more. Well, if we don't remember, or maybe we got a larger staff and you know, it's not down to remembering, they ask somebody else in IT, hey, I need a PC. Do you already have one on order? Do you already have one sitting on the shelf, right, et cetera, or do we need to order a new one? We need to go ahead and get that moving. Guy's going to start in 2 days. Sorry about the late notice, right? Well, if we don't have in our asset tracking system, and we weren't the one who made the purchase, or we don't have access to the purchase ordering system where we know that some were ordered, how many were ordered, is there a spare that's in that new order, whatever. If they're not in a system for us to go look at, we don't know. We go order some more, and then we find out, I didn't need to make that second order. So if we could go ahead and add them to our system before they even arrive, go ahead and say, hey, we just ordered 5 new computers. There they are. These 4 are already spoken for, but that one isn't. Could we do that? Yes, we can. But notice the asterisk next to manually add asset. It's really important. We have to think it through before we do. We have to make sure that we either know at ordering time, or really at entry into the K1 asset module time, we need to know some unique piece of information about that, okay? Preferably serial number, but we might not know the serial number at order time. Now, if I buy a bunch of Dell computers, sometime between when I make the purchase and when they show up at my office, physically get shipped, sometime in that week or 2 weeks or whatever, Dell can send me an Excel spreadsheet that would it would list all of the computers they're actually going to send me and the serial numbers and MAC addresses and so forth. They know that. So before they arrive, I could know that information. But at the time I actually make the purchase, they don't yet know which 10 they're going to ship to me. So they can't give me that information yet. So I might need to go assign it, maybe my own internal asset tag number, something that uniqueizes those 5, 10 computers from each other. And yes, I made up a word called uniqueize. I do that all the time, folks. Okay? So that's really important. We've got to make sure we enter some unique piece of information. We'll talk more about that a little bit later. Okay? Now, once it arrives, okay, it finally physically gets shipped to me. So I've already entered some spare assets, right, into the asset tracking system in the K1000, and now it actually arrives. It's here. Okay? I can begin doing something with it. So I'm going to set it up and, you know, to plug it into the network, blah, 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 whatever I do. And now I'm ready to actually provision it to automatically show up in the K1000, right? Whether it's an agent-based or an agent-less type of device, okay? Either way, it doesn't matter. But here's the thing. When I install that agent and the machine automatically for the very first time shows up in inventory, or whether I use my discovery tools in the K1000 to discover that device, if it's a non-agent based thing, I discover that device, router, switch, printer, whatever, and I mark it as an agentless inventory device, assuming I can do that, then it's going to show up in inventory. Either way, agent or agentless, it's now going to show up for the very first time in inventory, and here's the rub. I've got to make doggone sure that it links up with the existing orphaned asset, right? Because I created that asset manually a week or two ago. And when the computer or whatever actually shows up and jumps into inventory, I don't want it to create a whole new asset and leave my asset still orphaned and lose all that tracking information where I was tracking it, shipping, and all that kind of stuff. I want it to link up with that existing asset. Okay, that's the importance of that unique number thing that I talked about, that I'll talk about more later. I got to make sure that those two link up. Okay, so I get inventory, right? Custom inventory if it's an agent-based device, so I can get lots and lots of information. And now it shows up in inventory, and I got to make sure that it links to that manually created asset. Got to make sure it links to that manually created asset. Okay, that's the important bit here. I don't want to lose that linkage. I don't want it to, again, create a new asset. I want it to link up to the one I already previously manually created. And now I'm ready to actually deploy the device and use it in my environment, whatever that means. And I've got to remember at each of the stages of this, go back, and on that asset, I have a status field, right? The status might say on order. That's the very first status I use. And then it might say arrived, spare inventory, on shelf, something like that, right? And when I get to asset arrival, I'm changing it to that. And then initial setup for the next stage, I go and change the status field to initial setup, right? And then finally to deployed. And then I'll have other statuses in that field, right? I'll have maintenance, and I'll have down, dead, spare, on shelf. You know, the things will cycle back through all the various statuses throughout their life cycle. But today we're just concentrating on those initial parts, those initial steps in the life cycle of owning something. Okay? So let's remember this, right, in our heads visually as we go through today's content. Now, dynamic versus static data. What we mean here is, why do we have a device both in inventory and in assets? Why does it exist in two different places? Okay. Now, the things hopefully are linked together correctly, as we've already started that conversation about, right? But why two separate things? Okay. So your computers know certain things about your devices, your devices know certain things about themselves. You can see some of those in my first bullet point here. They already know some information about themselves, and they can be made to tell the K1000 lots of this information. Whether it's the kind of device we can install an agent on and take regular inventory and custom inventory from, or whether it's the kind of device that we can mark as an agentless device, and we can get lots of this same kind of information directly from the device itself on a regular automated basis, right? Inventory, whether it's agent-based or agentless, happens again and 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 over time. Okay, there's lots of information these things can tell us about themselves. So that information belongs in inventory. It's dynamically changing. It's automatically acquired from the device itself. Okay? So we set up our different types of things, right, in either agent or agentless to tell us this information about themselves automatically. But I should say, and if it's agent-based, right, we have regular inventory, we have custom inventory. We can be told this stuff, lots of this information we care about, the RAM and stuff that I just showed you, can be told to the K1000 automatically. With SNMP inventory configurations, okay, we can actually do lots of the same kind of stuff from agentless devices. You might not be familiar with this feature. It's been around now from the latest version of the, 6.3 is when it came out, this S&P inventory configurations, but you may not be familiar with it. Okay, we're going to cover this in detail in Thursday's KKE. So a lot of the information that an agent can tell the K1 about a computer, we can get directly from other devices, agentless devices as well. And we can use S&P inventory configurations to do that. So I'm going to cover that on Thursday. So that's all dynamic information now. That's all information that the devices know about themselves that can be made to tell the K1000, but there's a ton of other information you care about keeping track of that your machines can't know about themselves, and therefore can't be made to tell the K1000 for you. You have to go manually find this information, manually put it someplace, and manually keep it up to date, and manually keep track of it. That's what the asset side of the house is for, okay? Generally speaking, inventory is for that dynamic information. Asset is for that manual information. You see a bunch of examples in my first bullet point here. Information you care about keeping track of that your computers and routers and switches and firewalls and printers and so forth don't know about themselves, and therefore can't be made to tell you, whether by agent or agentless. They simply don't know this information and can't be made to tell you. Okay? Purchase date, purchase cost, PO number, lease contract number, the department you're assigning it to, the assigned user, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Computers, devices don't know this information about themselves. You can't make them tell you something they don't know. This is for asset side of the house. You manually create asset types for the different kinds of things that you want, and nowadays, asset subtypes, which we're going to talk about today. You manually customize fields, right? You can make drop-down boxes. You can make all kinds of different fields. We'll talk about those too. And then you manually input that data. You manually keep it up to date. Okay? It's the only way to get this information, the only way to keep track of that information is manual. There's no place to get it automatically from. So inventory is dynamic, asset is manual. That's the important distinction to understand. Cool? Now, to give you kind of a visualization of what I'm talking about here, right? The dynamic inventory side of the house, we can have the thing automatically tell us its operating system and serial number, its manufacturer and model, IP address, chassis type, et cetera, et cetera. Lots and lots of information the thing knows about itself, what software is installed, and so on. Okay? But then that other information we also care about keeping track of, right? The purchase date, PO number, vendor status, assigned to, department, et cetera. Okay? Notice I separate vendor and manufacturer. They may be two separate things. I can buy a Dell computer from Dell, but I can also buy a Dell computer from Walmart. Right? So I need to make sure I make these sorts of important distinctions. I might want to know, what all Dell things do we own versus what all things have we bought from Dell. I can buy Adobe software from Dell. Right? So I want to make these kinds of important distinctions. But the point here in this slide is merely the difference between the dynamic nature of inventory and the manual or static nature of assets. Okay? These two things work together for these two purposes. Now, as I mentioned, they're linked together. Let's take a simplest thing, something I install the agent on. I got a new computer. I've never, ever installed the agent on. It's brand new, just took it out of the box. I installed the agent on it. It's going to show up for the very first time in the inventory module. Okay? And there's a whole host of things that it checks to make sure that it is a brand new, unique computer, that it never has seen it in the past. It's not like you wiped and reloaded the hard drive on this machine, or heck, even replaced the hard drive with a new one, installed new Windows, et cetera, but it used to be in inventory. It's got the same serial number, et cetera, right? This is a bona fide brand new computer, never installed the agent. You got a whole host of checks that the K1 automatically makes to determine, right, is this really a new computer, or have I seen it before? Even if it's been wiped, have I seen it before? It checks all kinds of things. Primary among them, what's called the KUID. It's the case unique identifier, right? Anytime you install the agent on a device, if it doesn't have a KUID, if we can't figure out we've ever seen it before, we think it's a new thing, we're going to assign it a unique identifier, store it in the registry in Windows, store it in a plist file in Mac, and a file in Linux, and just a text file, and that stays on the hard drive. And you could change lots of information on that computer. You could change its operating system. You could change its serial number. You could change lots of information about that computer. When it reports back in the next time, as long as it's got the same KUID, it's the same device, as far as we know. Okay. So it's important to understand how that works. So bona fide new machine shows up in inventory for the very first time. Then it checks in assets and says, hey, do we already have an asset for this? Right? Maybe we had in fact installed the agent on this device in the past, but then it got deleted from inventory for whatever reason, but it never got deleted from assets. Do we already have it there? Can we relink to it? Or do we create a new one? It doesn't show up in assets. This is typically done by the name of the thing. And we can look at this a little bit later. There's a way to link inventory and asset and choose what field you want to link them by. You can change it, instead of the default name, you could change it to serial number, asset tag, or whatever you want, MAC address. Okay? But by default, it's linking by name. So it's going to look, do we already have a computer in inventory, or rather in assets, with the same name? If we do, let's link to it. If we don't, if we do have one, and it's not currently linked to another device in inventory, then we'll link to it. If we don't, we'll create a new asset. So it's important to understand, and this is why I need something unique. When I go pre-enter those 5 computers I just ordered from Dell into my asset module, they only exist in assets. They do not exist in inventory at this point. I need to know some unique piece of information that is the tying agent between these two. I need to know that unique information at some point before the device automatically shows up in inventory. Okay? I need to know and put this information into each asset, this unique piece of information, whether it's the name, whether it's serial number, whether it is asset tag, whatever it is, some unique piece of information from device to device to device to device. It's very unique. And that is my tying agent, okay, between inventory and assets. So that when I actually install the agent on the device or mark it as an agentless inventory device, either way, and it shows up for the very first time in inventory, it links up with my orphaned asset, right? My manually created asset. This is really important. You really want to think this through, okay? Again, the default is name, but you might want to change it to something else. You just need to make sure that your assets know that piece of information about themselves, right? If I go and change my marriage between inventory and asset to serial number, but the computer assets, the router assets, etc., they don't know the serial number of the device they're supposed to be linking to, that ain't going to work, right? Assets have to know the piece of information to know how to go find the one in inventory that has the same piece of information as it, okay? And just to stop real quick, Stuart asked, if I have the case agent in my image used to deploy to multiple machines, can this cause duplication problems in inventory? Absolutely. Do not bake the case agent into your image. Do not bake the case agent into your image. Okay. Andrew, you want to go find the most recent KKE recording you got on that topic and drop that into chat for everybody? Now, what's that, Andrew?
About the case agent stuff?
Yeah. The PO task one or something like that, maybe? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, cool. Okay, so asset types now. All right. We've got what kinds of things do we need to keep track of? We need to configure the asset types for those things. And prior to 6.4, really prior to agentless in 6.0, right, this is the way we would do it. We had the computer asset type way back when, and as of 6.0, we renamed the computer asset type to device because of the agentless feature, the discovery and all that sort of stuff. And then we might have other asset types. And this predates the day where we could have router switches and firewalls and such show up in inventory via agentless. We didn't have that ability. The only place we could keep track of non-agent things was in assets. And so we had asset types for those things. We had a printer asset type, And we would have to manually enter all of our printers and all the associated data. We'd create an asset type, and we'd have a field for DPI, and we'd have a field for how many paper trays, and we'd have a field for what kind of toner cartridge it has, and, et cetera. But there was no dynamically collecting any of this information, right? That's what agentless gave us. And S&P inventory configurations especially gave us the ability to capture that information automatically. But in those days, right, we would have to manually create asset types, manually customize them with the fields we needed to track whatever information we wanted, manually acquire the information about them, and manually enter it into those fields and manually keep them up to date. Okay, so we had separate asset types for all these things, and then everything else we needed, tons of asset types. But the only things that existed in both inventory and in assets were things that had agents installed, computers, laptops, desktop servers, that sort of thing. Right? They existed both in assets and in inventory, and those two things were linked together. Well, as of 6.0, when we have this discovery and agentless inventory ability, we could now discover things like routers, switches, firewalls, printers, et cetera, on our network and have them automatically show up in inventory, grabbing the inventory of them, lots of the information about them, whether by S&P or SSH or WinRM or all these other technologies. We could have them automatically tell us stuff about themselves, show up in inventory, just like something with an agent. But now they're all in that device asset type. All my stuff is there, which I've customized for my computers, right? I've got only fields that are relevant to my computers that aren't relevant to switches, routers, and printers, right? Like I've got attached monitors in my asset fields for my computer, for my computers, right? I want to know the first, second, third, if I've got, dual monitors, triple monitors, whatever, hooked to computers. I want to, because I got a monitor asset type too, where I'm keeping track of all my monitors, right? I want to know which one's connected to which computers. Well, that isn't relevant to routers, switches, and printers. They don't have attached monitors, right? And so on. I've got fields like that in my device asset type that aren't relevant to those, but now all of a sudden I got routers, switches, and printers showing up in my device asset type, and I want to have manual fields for them too. Things that are only relevant to routers that aren't relevant to the others. Things that are only relevant to printers that aren't relevant to the others. But I didn't have that ability to differentiate. Everything was in that device asset type bucket. Well, as of 6.4, we have asset subtypes. Really, really cool. Maybe the feature I'm most excited about in 6.4, and there are some really cool new features. So within my device asset type, my master asset type, if you will, you could think of it as parent and children, I suppose, but I think it makes more sense to think of it as a category and subcategories, right? So within my device asset type, I can create subtypes. And so those fields that are relevant to all the different sub-kinds of things that I'm going to have in my device asset type, all the things that I can make show up in inventory, whether agent or agentless, right? Computers, printers, switches, routers, firewalls. Maybe I have network-based projectors, smart whiteboards, things I can discover on my network using the discovery and agentless features that will talk some language like SSH or S&P or WinRM, that sort of thing, right? I can discover these devices on my network. They can show up in inventory, and therefore they're going to show up in assets as well, but all in the device asset type. I can now create subtypes for each of them, and now I have the ability to have fields that are only applicable to the right things show up with the right things. So with the master device asset type, I have location, department, cost, brand, model, serial number, things that apply to all the subtypes. But then in each subtype, I can store the fields that are only applicable to that subtype of devices, like on the computers. I don't have assigned users for switches. I don't need that field associated with switches. I need that field associated with my computers. Okay? Attached monitors, again, only applicable to computers, not applicable to the rest of them. Okay? The VM host, I've got virtual workstations, virtual servers. I don't have virtual printers or virtual switches. Don't exist. Right? So then a printer, right? Routers don't have DPIs. Switches don't have DPIs. Computers don't have DPI. Okay? They're not color or black and white. Okay? Computers don't have a web interface. or feed or toner cartridges, right? Ink cartridges, switches, right? They've got different attributes, different data that I want to keep track of than these other things. I can create subtypes and have fields that are only applicable to the specific subtype, only applied to the specific subtype. So at the device asset level, I can have the fields that are applicable across all my subtypes, but then in each subtype, I can have the fields that are applicable to only that subtype of devices. Okay? And I'm not limited to subtypes just within the device asset type. I can have subtypes everywhere, licenses and software and whatever other asset types of stuff I might want to keep track of. I can differentiate between those subtle differences, right, with my subtypes. So this is huge. I'll show it to you later. Right? Going to demo that today. Now, I mentioned this briefly earlier, how I can have, I can build drop-down boxes and all kinds of different types of fields within all my asset types and my asset subtypes. And I can actually see, I can actually configure those fields. Like if I only want you to be able to input money, right, dollars and cents into a field, then I can make it a currency field type. If I only want you to be able to put in a date, not just type in random stuff, but a specific date, that's all I want you to type into that field, then I can make it a date field type. And not only can you only type in a date, we'll accept that kind of information, but there'll actually be a little wizardy type thing, right, that you click it and there's a calendar and you can navigate months and days and pick one and it'll type it in for you. Okay, I can make drop-down boxes, whether it's the kind of drop-down box you can only select one single device, one single entry from. So here's your options A, B, C, D, E. You can only pick one of those. Or if it's a multiple select drop-down box where maybe something can be applicable to multiple locations, right? And I want to be able to select all the locations that it might be applicable to, or something. Okay, I've got a whole host of different kinds of field types. So when I'm configuring each of my asset types and each of my subtypes, and I'm building in the fields that are applicable to that particular thing, I can customize the fields greatly to be exactly what I want them to be. I can have a hyperlink field, right? I can have, I can link assets to people, right, by a user field type. I can link assets to other assets by creating asset type fields. Right? So if I want to be able to assign printers to departments, I can have a department field within my printer type or printer subtype, and it'll have all of my departments listed, and I can choose from them. Okay? It's going to have all kinds of different fields, and all the different fields can have the specific type that they should so that everybody knows what kind of data should go in that particular field. I can customize all of this. Now, to that end, you may notice things like I just mentioned, right? Types of assets that you wouldn't consider assets. You probably think of assets as things you can hold in your hand, things you can put on a shelf. Okay, maybe you can even conceive of virtual assets, software, licenses, things you can't hold in your hand, but you can still think of them as something, as a thing, right? But then you've got vendors, which are other companies. Manufacturers, which are other companies, departments, which are a concept in your head. It's not a thing, right? You may see these, or you may have been told by your Jumpstart trainer to create asset types for these kinds of things and wonder why, if assets is for tracking things, why you're creating asset types related to concepts, ideas, right? It's simply because it makes it much simpler to link these concepts and ideas to your other things. If I have a list of manufacturer assets, then building a manufacturer field in one of my other asset types, like printers or routers or chalkboards or whatever, is much simpler because I'm going to want a manufacturer field, a vendor field, a department field, a location field, and all of my other asset types. I want to know the location of my printers just as well as I do my computers, just as well as I do my furniture and my projectors and everything. I want that location field in all of them, and I don't want to have to build a separate location field with option A, option B, option C, option D, option E, in every one of them that I have to constantly keep up to date as I add new locations. I'm going to create an asset type. There's actually already one built in called location, and I'm going to go enter each of my locations as an asset, as a location asset. And now the drop-down field essentially builds itself for me in those other types. Okay? We'll see this in our demo as well. Now, importing these assets. Okay, I've decided what all kinds of things I need to keep track of. But I don't want to have to enter all 1,500 of my printers manually, one at a time. All right, I'm going to go to Choose Action New. Pops a sub-menu. I pick printer, right, or router or computer or whatever. I don't want to have to enter all of those manually. I want to be able to bulk import them out of my existing spreadsheets that I already have. That is the old way I keep track of, that I'm keeping track of my stuff. Right now I've got the K1, I'm going to transition away from my spreadsheets, but before I do, I can import directly from those spreadsheets. And not only can I do that the first time, right, to get my asset module built up with all my stuff, but I can do it on an ongoing basis. If you're still doing the every 6-month physical inventory type thing to verify that all our records are true and we have the stuff where we think it is, this printer's there and that projector's there and so forth, right, then we can, and we already have that information in our K1000, we can spit it out via the reporting module into spreadsheets. Right? We can walk around with our tablet and our spreadsheet pulled up, and we can change the information as we physically go make sure that this printer is there. Oh, no, it's in a different location. Let me change the field, blah, blah, blah. And then we can turn right around and re-import that information right back into the K1000 and update the records, mass update. We don't have to do it one at a time. So it's good for both building up initially all of our assets, and it's good for doing mass updates later on. Okay, and from the same import, we can both create new printers that we discovered that we didn't know about and update existing ones whose information has changed. It can do the same thing, and it can do both of those things as part of the same import. Okay, but there are a few rules when it comes to our imports. And you can see them here on the screen. Right, we got to make sure that we have fields inside of our different asset types to correspond to the information we want to pull in from our spreadsheet. If we don't have a field for you know, what kind of paper tray it has, then we can't import that information from the spreadsheet. So we've got to make sure we have the necessary fields to import. It's got to be in a CSV, not in XLS format. It's got to be CSV, okay, comma separated values. And Excel, you can simply go to File, Save As, and save it as a CSV. Easy peasy, no problem. Okay. You got to make sure that on each sheet, on each spreadsheet you want to import from, we're talking about one asset type at a time, just printers or just routers or just switches. You can't mix and jumble those up into one sheet and import it. It's not going to work. Okay? You got to pick which kind of thing you're importing from that one sheet. Right? So we just have a sheet of printers, a sheet of switches, a sheet of routers. Okay? Make sure that you've got all of your necessary asset type necessary fields that are used across all asset types that I just mentioned, like departments and locations and manufacturers. You want to make sure you have those all squared away first before you start importing the things that are related to those. Okay? And you got to make sure you know what you're doing. We have a little preview thing that's part of the import wizard that helps you see what you're doing before you hit that all important change everything and potentially break what I've got going on by importing. Okay? Make sure that you don't have a garbage in, garbage out problem. Make sure that your sheet is good, especially if this is the first time you're ever building up from your existing information. A lot of your spreadsheets are really old and out of date, got bad info. You import that stuff, it's not doing you a lot of good. You make sure your data is good before you import it into the K1. Okay? Now, demo. Okay, that might be a world record for me, Andrew. That was pretty doggone fast. Okay, let me share my K1000 with you. Andrew, please let me know when you see it.
Looking good.
All right, cool. So here, folks, and Andrew, just interrupt me if any questions come in or anything that you think are applicable to what I'm covering.
Yep.
Okay, so Here are my asset types, okay? And you can see some that are built in that you already have. There's cost center and department, and there's the device asset type, license, location, software and vendor are already built in. You can see that I've added a few myself. There's monitor. I've got service contracts in here, billing customers, things of that nature that I've built myself. Manufacturer, the one I mentioned earlier. And but what we want to concentrate on today is the device asset type, which I've already opened up here. Okay, and this may look a little different than what you got, especially if you haven't begun working with subtypes since you've upgraded to 6.4. So here are the subtypes that I've already built in this section right here, and I can add a new one by clicking this button. I can edit my existing ones by clicking the pencil, and I can delete any one I want to by clicking the trash can. But before we get into that, let's look at the asset fields here. These are those fields that are applicable to all of my subtypes of devices. All of them have a name. All of them have a location. They exist somewhere. All of them belong to a department, or at least multiples of them could belong to a department. It's a field that belongs up here, not necessarily down at that level. All of them have a serial number, an asset tag, a brand, a model, a status, and so on. Okay? And you can see my field types over here, right? This is the kind of field you can type up to 255 characters of whatever kind of character you want. This is the kind of field that's already going to list all of my location assets in a drop-down box for you. Notice I didn't have to type in all the locations. It's because I already added them as separate assets, and now it's going to make a drop-down box. Same thing with departments, manufacturers, and my service contracts, you can see. Okay? But then I've got other kinds of fields. I got a date field, I got a currency field, a hyperlink field, right? And a single select field where I did type in a bunch of options. All of my devices, no matter what type they are, or subtype, they're going to have a status. Either they've been ordered or they're sitting spare on a shelf for me to use. They've been taken off the shelf to be configured. They're deployed and in use somewhere. They're being maintained in some way. If it's a printer, I needed to change the toner cartridge, something along those lines. Maybe it's down, right, sitting on a shelf, or just sitting in an office while somebody's gone for 2 weeks. It's down. Maybe it's dead and needs to be fixed in some way. It doesn't work. It's waiting for its end of life. It's been retired, destroyed, donated, something along those lines. Every one of my different kinds of things I need to keep track of could be in one of those states and is going to cycle through those states throughout its life cycle. Okay? So these are the fields that are applicable across all my asset types. And prior to 6.4, if I wanted any fields that were only applicable to this kind of device or that kind of device or these kinds of devices, it would all be down here because I only had here to do. And if it was a field that was only applicable to routers, or 5 or 10 fields that were only applicable to routers, they would all just be sitting there and all my computer assets unused, taking up space. All my printer assets unused, taking up space, right? But as of 6.4, I can make them only show up to devices that they're applicable to. So I'm going to open up a few, and we're going to go take a look at them. Okay, so here's my workstation type, and you can see I can name them whatever I want. And if I wanted to differentiate between laptops and desktops, I could, right? Or in-office devices, remote devices. If there was some reason that I wanted to have different fields for those different kinds of things, I can make up whatever subtypes I want, as many of them as I want. Okay? Now, there is a limit right now. These subtype fields, I can only have 64 total subtype fields. Okay, so I've got 4 here, and you'll see in the others I've got different numbers of subtype fields in those other asset subtypes. Right now, we've got a limitation of only 64. That'll be increasing in a future version of the K1. I can see the inherited fields that are from the root or master asset type. They're all listed here. They're all grayed out because they're not changed at this level. They're changed at the previous level. But here are the fields that I can create new ones of. I can edit move them up and down in whatever order I want, or delete them, change them whatever kind of field type I want them to be, and I can place them within the section of the inventory page that I want. That's really, really cool. I'll show you that in a little bit. Okay. So I needed assigned users. All my computers get assigned to a person. Okay. They have, we have some people with just one monitor, some people with dual monitors. So I wanted to know which of my monitor assets is physically connected to which computer, so I can go and enter that information manually. And if it's a virtual workstation, what VM host is it running on? Okay. So these fields are only applicable in workstation type. And then another really cool thing, if there are pages, or rather if there are sections or subsections of the inventory page, remember, all these things, whether agent or agentless, are going to show up in my inventory and in my assets. But if there are sections of the inventory page that aren't applicable to that particular kind of thing, then I can hide either just individual subsections or entire sections. Okay, which makes the inventory page only show the useful information. So up here where I added some of these fields, right, I put them in certain sections. I don't want to hide the hardware on this particular one because I'm using it to host those two fields. Right? I'll show you another one that might illustrate that a little bit better. Okay, here's my server subtypes, a little bit different than my workstations. My servers can be mounted in racks and have an RU number. Workstations don't have that. Workstations can have a VM host, but routers don't. Switches don't. Printers don't. Generally speaking, my workstations don't have redundant power, so I wanted to differentiate between servers and workstations. Yeah, they're all computers, and yeah, they all have an operating system. And in my environment, yeah, they all have Windows, right, of one flavor or another. But there were a few fields might be a little bit different. Okay, all my servers are Dell servers, and they all come with DRAC cards, so they all have a web interface. Okay, workstations don't. Okay, and so on. And then when I go look at my other things, here's my firewalls and routers. They're so similar, I didn't feel like I needed to differentiate and have a firewall subtype and a router subtype. Okay, I'd like a better name than that, maybe network edge device or something. I don't know. I got to think that through. Okay, and here are fields that are particular to them. They're not applicable. And by the way, notice this is a multiple select because my device is actually both a firewall and a router. So I need to be able to choose both or one or the other. Okay, and then I got fields that are applicable to only routers or firewalls. They're not applicable to workstations, not applicable to servers, not applicable to printers, switches, and so on. Okay, and then down here, look, I've hidden stuff. Routers don't have printers. They don't have a Chrome OS. They don't have mobile information. They don't have a user. No drive encryption, no Mac profiles, no software, right? I've gone and hidden subsections or entire whole sections from the pages of my firewalls and my routers because it just takes up space. There's no info there. I don't need to make that page longer and more busy than it needs to be. This is all brand new in 6.4 with these asset subtypes. Huge. Similar with my printers. Okay. Lots and lots and lots of information that I need to keep track of. And next, or this Thursday, 2 days from today, we're going to cover how to make a lot of this stuff not manually collectible. There's lots of this information my printers can tell me about themselves. Okay, by SNMP or something. So I can have the printers automatically direct certain information directly into certain fields for that particular bit of information. I'm going to show you how to do that on Thursday. Okay, so if I go and I look at inventory and I pick one of these agentless devices, now you've seen the agent-based inventory page, but let's pick one of these agentless devices. Let's take my, my new printer. I click on it. Okay, you can see similar information to an agent-based device. It's got a name and so forth. It's also where what subtype it is, right? Is it agent or agentless? Okay, you notice I can change those fields. If it's not a printing device, I got that wrong. It's a router. I can go and change that. Okay. And it's getting the IP information and MAC address information automatically. I didn't have to tell it to go get that information or anything. And then it's got some of my custom fields that I built in the asset that I told to put in the summary section. They're up here. Okay, I need to go enter some information here on some of these. And this is an example of one of the SNMP fields I'm going to show you on Thursday. Okay, I'm looking at the printer. It's right there. You can't see it, but I can. Right, it's sitting right to the left of my desk. And yeah, it's idle. I can tell that. That's actually being populated via agentless inventory. And I've got other bits of information here. Okay, as John showed you last Tuesday, if it's a Dell device and via agent or agentless inventory we can get its service tag, then we can automatically go look it up at Dell and find this information. That's just automatic. Happens for you. Right? But how about this? Pretty cool, huh? Toner cartridge % remaining. That is automatically populating via inventory. I don't have to go and look it up on the web page. I don't have to go and get on the panel, the control panel of the printer itself and look at it. Right? That information is accessible and available via SNMP. I'm going to show you how to build that and auto-populate that kind of information. Okay? As well as this one and that one and so forth. Okay? And notice it's a much lighter page because I've hidden all those sections and subsections that aren't relevant to printers. Okay? And one of the great things about all this is it's automatically making my network things show up in my inventory, automatically making them show up in assets. And now they show up, I don't have to enter them. Maybe lots of the information I care about keeping track of about these things. I can even make it automatically get, as we'll see on Thursday. And now they show up, and I can create and have help desk tickets that are related to them. Right? I can track them as assets and who they're assigned to and what are assets they're related to and linked to and so on. Okay? Lots and lots of cool stuff that I can do. So that's what I wanted to show you today. I can't believe we did all this in less than an hour. I'm shocked. So we still got plenty of time for Q&A. So now what we're going to do, folks, in just a second, Andrew's going to unmute your microphones. And what he does, every one of us going to hear, and the recording will record any and all of the sounds might be coming through your mic. So as soon as Andrew unmutes all of you, you might immediately mute yourself. To the right of your name is a mute button, and you can just re-click it to mute yourself until you're ready to talk. Alternatively, you can use the chat window. If you do so, please send your chat message to all panelists, not just host only, which is the default, so that both Andrew and I will see your question. You can also use the Q&A panel as well to send your question to us. So without further ado, if you would please, Andrew. There we go, folks. You're all unmuted. Okay, folks, so go for it. What questions do you have? Andrew, anything lingering in chat or Q&A? Looks like Stuart had a question. If I have it, nope, we already answered that one. Okay, cool. All right, Kevin asked, if I have already created asset types for, say, printers, do I have to re-import or can I move them? You can't move them, Kevin. It's an excellent question, by the way. You can't move them, but yeah, you could use the reporting module to spit it out into Excel, right, all the information. You could go build out a printer subtype, okay? You notice I called mine printing devices because I have copiers, I have scanners, I have printers, and I have all-in-one devices. Might have fax machines I want in there as well, right? So I would call it something a little more generic than just straight-up printers. But I can create that as a subtype, make sure I build in all the relevant fields that I need. Some of those fields will be at the root device asset type, but a lot of those fields will be down in the printer device asset subtype. And then I can re-import, easy peasy, right from that spreadsheet that got spit out from my K1. Does that make sense, Kevin?
Yeah, it does. Hey, to further that question, to back that up real quick, Ron, so then on the field types for the assets that you're creating, do you guys have a list of fields that you find useful with drop-downs or multi-choice that you guys have found useful for tracking assets within your organization that we could model off?
Are you asking us here at CASE, or are you asking your fellow customers here on the line today?
Oh, either one would be fine. Is there, because I could sit here and bang my head against, well, what things do I want to track about my printer? Or somebody could say, hey, these are what we've used and found that we needed, and a month later we said, hey, we need to just add this field too. Maybe there's a specific list for that.
Let me first give you a philosophy, and then I'll be happy and welcome all input on it. So right now, you have some information, likely, already in spreadsheets that you want to keep track of. So that's the first thing. Build them for that. Start there. Secondly, one of the big reasons I have assets in there in the first place is, especially you take my printers, for instance, okay? So let me reshare real quick. I want to share this with you. Okay, let me share my K1000, and I will show you what I'm talking about. Okay.
Yeah, because I already have my printers in there. So.
Yeah, well, let me show you the specific bits of information, though. That's what I'm going to show you.
Yeah.
Okay. So if I have a ticket, and it is, okay, so let me just apply that. All right, so it is showing me here that it is related to this particular printer. Okay, so toner cartridge low, say, something. Well, I can click View Details here directly from the ticket. What information would be helpful for me to have here to know anything about the toner cartridge? Well, potentially, I might want to go to inventory and look at the, if I'm collecting it via SNMP, look at the toner cartridge percentage that I have here. Oh, it's not low. That might be one way. Maybe SNMP won't work for me for this particular model printer. It doesn't show me that bit of information. Maybe instead, at here. Okay, so maybe in, where was I at? Let me go back over here. I can't remember what page I was on. All right. Yeah, we'll just go back here. Okay, so let's go back to my ticket. Okay. All right, here we are. So let's click here, View Details. Maybe I might have collected this bit of information here, and I can go directly to that website, and I can come find out all about what toner cartridge I need to purchase.
Okay.
So that might be a field that's useful to have. Maybe my printer has a web interface itself, and maybe that might be a field that's useful to have, because here I can come and potentially find out the status of the toner cartridge right here, right off the bat. Right? So that's information you might not be tracking right now that might be useful to start tracking, because the whole purpose here is I have a ticket about that particular kind of device. I need to have information at my fingertips to go fix the problem and close the ticket, right? So at first you start with the fields you already have and you already keep track of. Build fields for those, import that data from your spreadsheet. Over time, because you don't have time to stop and guess what all these things you might be that I just showed you are, go collect all that information and input it all into the K1000 assets. Over time, as a ticket comes in for a printer, you go collect that information you need to troubleshoot that problem. You come here, create fields in the asset subtype. You enter that information manually at one time, and the next time a ticket comes on that particular printer, voila, the information is already there. Same thing, the next time another printer, another router, another switch, as the tickets come in about those things, as part of fixing the problem that one time, collect information that was necessary, useful in fixing that problem, and input it in here so you both, A, know what information it is I even care about keeping track of. Why do I even care? Two reasons. One, to have reportability on what we own and stuff about it. Two, to be able to quickly fix problems. That's why I have asset tracking, right? So I've got that done, right? I've got information that's relevant to, not a bunch of stuff I think would be cool to keep track of, but stuff that's actually useful, practically useful to me in my day-to-day job, right? And it was collected organically. It didn't take a whole lot of extra time. Nobody had to stop their job and go collect all this information that we think is going to be useful. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So that's my input. Now, if anybody else who's gone through that kind of process and you already know some awesome fields for routers or printers or whatever, by all means, please, everybody feel free to speak up and help us out here, help your fellow customer out.
Sorry, I was muted there. We got some questions in the Q&A.
Okay, let me pull it up. Okay, Warren said, is there still an agentless limit? I recall it used to be something like 20 servers as a limit. I do know that there's a limit in monitoring. We're going to have a KKE coming up on monitoring in a little bit, in a couple weeks, I think. And there'll be there's a limit of 5 included with your K1, and you can purchase an additional license that'll bump that up to 200. But I'm not aware of a currently enforced limit with agentless. But you can always check with your sales team, Warren. Go ahead.
There is a sort of a limit where
packs.
if a device can accept an agent, right, then it will count towards your managed agent number, right? And if you are, Ron, you might want to go show your about window. That'll probably help explain this stuff. It's under the question mark now. You can see, and what you should do is you should check in your K1000 where it says assets over to the right, right? And if you've been a customer since when 6.3 dropped, right, you were grandfathered in, you have 100% unlimited assets, which are the items that cannot accept agents, right? Those are your routers and switches and firewalls and things like that, right? But otherwise, you would have to purchase asset packs in order to increase that limit.
I'm not sure that's enforced though at this point, Andrew.
I don't know. That's sales, you know.
Yeah, that's why I always those questions are best
I
directed
say
at sales.
come here and then see what you have, and then talk to sales.
Yep. Cool. And then Troy asked, can you assign a single asset to more than one user, like a common printer? You certainly could. I could go into my asset type configuration, and I could make this field, and I could add a second field, right? Just like I've got 2 monitor fields, I could add a second field here for another assigned user. I could add as many as I wanted to. Make them all user field types so that all my users show up in the drop-down box automatically for people to choose from. But I could add a second assigned user, third assigned user, whatever. I could do that sort of thing if I needed to. Troy. Okay.
That would get unwieldy over time, though, depending on how many people you'd want to add. I mean, you're better off assigning it to a group or a department, right?
Yep. Yeah, you could even create an asset type called groups. Something crazy if you wanted to.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, and then assign people to groups. Yeah.
And to stuff to the groups as well.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay, Warren said he was thinking of the monitoring limit and the 200 servers.
Okay.
Okay, cool. So that's taken care of. It looks like I'm caught up on Q&A and chat. So
yep.
Not only are we still welcoming any other questions you might have, but if anybody has any input on, I forget who it was that asked the question about the different asset type fields that they find useful. I'd love to hear anybody's opinions on that. Anyone? Anyone? Troy said he never thought about setting up a group. He will have to think about that one. Thanks. You're most welcome, Troy. What else, folks? Has anybody used the new asset subtypes feature? Maybe you've been part of the beta program, and so you've had 6.4 for a few months now. Has anybody used Asset subtypes, got any good war stories to tell us? Folks, you never know what thing you've discovered that you might think is just little and not worth mentioning that might be huge to somebody else.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is Kevin again. I've been building, asset groups, not as the subtypes, but asset groups just to track my assets in sort of the main categories, which has been excellent for me. But I'm glad that they're now tied. I can do my, like I have Sharp printers, Sharp MSPs, but I can tie those to an SNMP feed. Because I probably have another, other than the Dell machines, I probably have another like 200 or 300 devices that are outside that scope that I need to tie to, including switches and routers and firewalls and whatnot. So I'm actually pretty excited to sort of dig into this and start organizing.
Excellent. Excellent. Good. Well, definitely, Kev, come to Thursdays where we're gonna literally go through that. Right. We're gonna go through. Okay, I've got, and I'll probably use my printer. I'll go through and show you how to discover it correctly on the network, how to make it an agentless inventory device so that it shows up in both inventory and in assets, and start collecting, not only collecting the SNMP data in one gigantic, big, huge bulk dump of the SNMP walk, but actually be able to find specific bits of info within that massive SNMP walk that you want to pull out and direct them into these specific discrete fields like I've got here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, a question, probably not directly to this, but part of it. So I have a whole properties division that is tracking furniture, like you said in the beginning of your presentation, tracking furniture. And I suspect they're tracking it in a bunch of spreadsheets right now, which I know I'm trying to get rid of. Is there a way, now I know I can create the asset types, but is there a way to secure them so that I am not giving them admin access into the whole of the K1000, just sort of segmenting them off to the little section I want them to have access to? Then I want them wandering off into my devices section.
You certainly can. You could give them access to the admin console, but only the assets page here, this one page. They wouldn't see anything else, right? And then they could enter assets. But you probably don't want them to do that, because to give them the ability to create new assets or edit existing ones, they can also delete all of your assets, not just the stuff, the furniture. So what I'd probably end up doing is they'd continue to use spreadsheets. So for instance, they bought a new desk. They give you a spreadsheet with the particulars about that desk, and you could do an import. And now you've got a new desk showing up in inventory. They go make a bunch of changes to desks or chairs or chair mats or whatever. They can give you a spreadsheet that you can import to update. And when they need to do that, you can spit out a spreadsheet for them from the K1 so their only knowledge and interaction with the K1 as far as assets are concerned is through spreadsheets, but they made it easier for you. You have to do the labor for them, but they made it super simple because you can import directly from the spreadsheet they're working on.
Yeah, and that'd be great for them too, because I've actually set up a ticket queue for them, a service ticket queue for properties.
Even easier. Even easier. Because you could automate that with ticket rolls, right? Yeah. So let's say you got an existing desk already in assets, right? Yep. And they need to tell you they moved that desk from Office A21 to Office A38, right? So they could literally go in and create a ticket. That you have the asset field that can pick which desk it was right there in the ticket, right? Yep. And then the from location field, the to location field, they populate that, they save the ticket. You could literally have a ticket rule that reads that information and automatically updates the asset.
Okay.
I'm not saying it's super simple to build that ticket rule. I'm just saying it's possible.
I see where you're going.
Yeah, right? Yeah. And that's something our RPS team could help you with, our remote professional services team. if you were interested, you could get a quote from them on how much that would cost for them to set up that kind of thing for you.
No, I mean, because I'm certainly putting other groups other than IT into
Yep.
managing their own help desk essentially.
Yep.
So they have their own queues, and so
Awesome.
so that I'm not the only purveyor and controller of all this information. I'm trying to get other people involved in some limited way too.
Excellent.
It grows to be so big.
Yep.
So,
outstanding.
So absolutely.
Did you come to our workflows KKE recently, Kevin?
I probably did not. I don't know if Eric Martin, my support supervisor, did or not. He's kind of the wonk that controls this. I'm the one who comes up with far-fetched ideas on what we should do.
And make him have to figure out how to implement them, right?
Yeah, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, you might go check it out, because since you've got all these different queues, we talked about in that IT help desk ticketing workflows KKE recording, which you can go watch in a recording archive. We talked about how to utilize that with a bunch of processes that might be useful to you. So.
All right. Excellent. KKE ticketing workflow will do.
All right. Anything else? What else can we help you with today, folks? All right. Well, if there's nothing else, then we'll go ahead and call it a day. I want to thank everybody for coming. It's been a blast. It always is with these. Definitely, I hope to see you at Thursday's KKEs and any and all others that we have. For those of you who signed up for Backyard Bootcamp for the Dell World event, I look forward to meeting you all there. Until next time, folks, have a great day.
Bye-bye, everyone.